the intro is pre-recorded, so we'll just go straight into sort of a chat. And like the general running at the beginning is we might do a bit back and forth. Jason will introduce you. I'll ask a question so you can start talking about Civillo. It is pronounced Civillo, yeah?
Yes, correct, yeah.
It's
Civillo.
Not Spanish like Sevilla.
No, Civillo,
yeah. It's got the double L, isn't it?
That's the cold open.
That's the intro, yeah. You're listening to the Offsite podcast with Jason and Carlos, where we talk all things construction and technology.
Join us for discussions with industry leaders and insights into the latest trends in construction. Welcome back to the Offsite podcast. Olu, cue the music. I think we'll get into play over the top some welcome back music for Carlos. This week we're joined back in the seat by Carlos, mate. New dad, how are you going? Full dad bod on show?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Full dad bod is in motion. I've only just started doing a bit of exercise to now try and reverse what's happened. But 4 weeks in, it's been great. My wife does the heavy lifting, which allows me to still sort of function as a human. So
that's really not good. What you were saying off. That was not what you were saying off recording. You're obviously being politically correct.
Yeah. I do all the night feeds and nappies. Yeah, she'd throw something at me if she had me say that on a podcast for sure.
There's no way Rosie's listening to this anyway, so it's fine.
No. She's got much more interesting things to do. But no, good to be back.
You can rest assured Mike was very happy to hand the mic back to you after a few weeks away, and there's probably some UK listeners happy to have a proper British accent back in their headphones.
Yeah, no. Actually a massive thank you to Mike for doing that. I know it's something he wasn't like 100% keen on. So I've actually listened to the episodes when I was away, so you didn't drop the ball at all. It was good. But,
cool. Take that as a compliment. So what was coming back like? 7 million emails to work through?
It was a 4-figure email count. That was nice. But once you get rid of all the sales and marketing emails like the ones we send to everyone, you can cut that pretty quickly. So no, the team were good. They actually, I came back to no chaos and progress on most aspects of what I left. So it's weird coming back after a few weeks. You feel like you're completely out of the loop with everything, but caught up pretty quickly.
Well, straight back into it, mate. So I guess for this week, what I thought we could talk about with a guest is we always see coming up in conversation in the UK and Oz mapping and the importance of mapping and how different teams use mapping. And we've had lots of conversations before about GIS and different products. A few weeks ago, Rory joined from Propeller. And so I want to introduce as a guest this week, Steve White, who's the general manager at Civillo. Civillo are a Australian-based survey mapping GIS type platform used, I see increasingly by lots of the sort of large infrastructure contractors over here. So Steve, mate, thank you very much for taking the time. It's a pleasure to have you join us on this Wednesday evening.
Well, thank you guys. It's good to be here. I've listened to a few of the podcasts over the last few weeks and months. So, it's fun to be on it. It's going to be a trip to hear myself back.
You don't listen to it. That's the number one.
I'm not sure I will actually.
Pretend it never happened. Don't listen to it back. The last thing you want to do is listen to your own voice on a podcast.
That is true. That's true.
Cool. So I think I said to you just before, we might start with the most bog standard, boring podcast interview question that ever you could get asked. But for those that haven't heard of Civillo, give us the cliff notes to run through how teams use it as I guess a bit of context, mate.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the background behind Civillo is that we're all surveyors by trade. So working on a lot of these big infrastructure projects, like level crossings, road upgrades, things like that. A lot of geospatial data going around, and a lot of onus on surveyors and GIS people and designers to have that info and have all the software to use it. The challenge, of course, is that how do you communicate that to the rest of the project? And that's where we have, plans and cross sections and all these different things. So the idea behind Civillo was, can we take all the spatial data that we have as surveyors, put it online on a sort of easy to use web application, and allow everyone to actually access that data in a really user-friendly way. And then they can use the data themselves to do a lot of the planning, a lot of the decision making with that data without having to rely on other people.
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer in that mission, and the interactions that we've had and through our team with some shared customers is that's the sort of feedback they have as well, mate. I guess the idea of geospatially or through a map being the best way to communicate or analyze or interrogate or see a lot of the data on construction projects is something that it's an idea that's been presented by, I guess, lots of people. I'm a big believer in it. What do you see as like the status quo, or where is that? How far along that idea of everything kind of going into mapping context do you think things are at the moment?
Yeah, good question. It's certainly getting better, and there's more data out there and more attributes and different sorts of data going in as well. It really ranges from project to project, from company to company, of course. So the standard stuff is, getting your feature survey, your aerial imagery, your design data, and overlaying that underground services and utilities as well as a big one. Yep. We are seeing more and more now, more advanced 3D models, more attribution on data sets, and I guess more sort of digital and spatial literacy, I think, amongst the industry now that everyone's sort of coming to grips with the fact that this stuff is really important, and it really helps to give some certainty to the project, knowing, all right, exactly where things are going to be and how they interact.
And do you think the biggest beneficiary of the data being in that way, like on your typical project, is it like the engineer, is it the supervisor, is it the project manager? Who gets the most value out of like pulling that stuff into the same place?
I think you've sort of named three of the top sort of people who get value.
I've done this before almost, mate.
So definitely the engineers really use Civillo a lot. So it's really helpful for the planning, knowing where things are. It allows them to, do markups and things like that, and, work, do staging plans and sort of work towards what they're going to do. Also, excavation permits, which we might talk about at some stage as well. They can use spatial data to plan for those effectively. But supervisors as well, like in the field, from a Civillo perspective, the application's mobile. So we have a lot of supervisors actually who are not really tech-savvy people, but say have a high uptake of using it with an iPad and actually just being able to visualize the data in the field digitally rather than, on a PDF plan that is sort of small and out of date. So I suppose it's those types of people that get a lot of value out of it.
It's been a few years for sure. Back when I was on projects, like geospatial systems were kind of within the geospatial team. It wasn't as broadly used as it is now across the delivery team in particular. What's the sort of catalyst for that change? Is it the fact that like BIM models are just hard to use and time consuming and they're never up to date? Is it drone surveys obviously sort of giving us quick fire information in a practical way? How has it sort of worked its way across teams now? Because it seems to be pretty common, particularly on infrastructure jobs.
Yeah, I think it's got more prevalent as it's got more accessible. So I suppose, again, one of the reasons we sort of built Civillo 10 years ago was because the sort of software that you could actually view the spatial data on was quite complex, or you needed to be an expert, or you needed to have access to it or have a license to it, which a lot of your construction delivery team don't have that access. So your geospatial professionals, your geospatial team, as you said, they have all that. They have all their software. They know exactly how to use it, but the rest of the team didn't. So as platforms, I suppose, develop and evolve to make that data more accessible, I think that's why we're seeing more use of geospatial data and more knowledge and uptake to use it on projects.
Yeah, that accessibility element of having like up to date, accurate information there in an app that you can actually use.
I think it's really interesting to explore, Steve, the way you see the technology and the people and projects' use of geospatial technology going in the future. We had talked about previously, like some applications you guys have built on top of it, but where do you see it? What do you see the workflows being that benefit from being on top of the geospatial data? And for those that don't know, you, I guess, recently released like a permit style module that, and is there anything else that you see on top of it?
Yeah, well, I'll start off with the permit module since you mentioned it. But yeah, one of the common workflows or common uses for spatial data that we saw our clients using, and I mentioned before, is excavation permits and underground utilities. They were creating a lot of plans and sort of using that data, but the process was still very, very sort of paper-based, very manual, very time-consuming. So I think building a digital workflow to sort of go through that process is right now sort of helping to save a lot of time. And I guess the key is that you're leveraging that geospatial data from the start, and then you're sort of building that digital workflow on top of that. And I think in a similar way, where it's going to go with geospatial data is building more of those type of digital workflows, leveraging the geospatial data. So integrating with different products and different softwares that do different things. So for instance, like we know we've talked about with you guys at Apex, how you have integrations with geospatial platforms into your platform to link up what you guys are doing and the geospatial data. So I think that is the future of geospatial data and geospatial and digital workflows, I think, is to link up those different things.
So, because there's like an interesting product question that comes up in my head that I've thought about a couple of times before. You've got this kind of one direction of travel, which is you've got like kind of a geospatial system like a Civillo or an ArcGIS that is kind of this canvas in which you can build the workflows on top of, in your case, like permits. And we see teams running on top of ArcGIS, like community notification processes and permit processes as well. Or you've got this kind of other product, like how the world unfolds direction, which is that there are apps built for the workflow. So there's the app for permitting that has like a quick way to do the mapping thing, and then it generates data and sends it over to this central repository like a Civillo or an ArcGIS. Do you have I'm guessing you probably have like a foot in both camps, but do you have a view on which way is more likely to, the majority of people are likely to go?
Yeah, you're right. It's a fine line to balance, right? So, from our perspective, we're never going to be able to build everything on top of Civillo, and that's probably the same with a lot of other platforms. You sort of can't do everything. There's sort of, you got to strike a balance between, okay, what really makes sense to happen all within the platform, which we thought the permits did because the spatial side of it was so heavy. But then there's also going to be other things, and whether it's community outreach or whether it's planning and scheduling and things like that. That's if another software is really, really suited to this task and is better, I guess, than what you can build yourself, then it makes more sense to connect those platforms rather than try and spend the time and the money sort of trying to do something that's already been done. If that makes sense. So yeah, we sort of deal with it all the time. We get a lot of requests from clients about, oh, hey, can you sort of do this, or can we do that in Civillo, or this in Civillo? And it's a sort of battle every day to figure out, all right, what can we build, or what can we integrate with? It's challenging, but I think there's room for both.
Yeah, 100%. It's actually similar to the conversation that we had the other week with Rory, where it's like, I don't know if we did this on the recording or after, but the idea that if you build one feature or you start building something that is like a client asking you to handle this workflow or whatever, you start building in that direction, it kind of gives everyone a glimpse of, oh, well, if we kept going in that direction, it could do this and this and this. And you kind of set yourself on a trajectory that you get pulled into that you might not have been intending. And so it's really tricky. Like you start going, permits, and then they ask, can you do, I don't know,
QA,
notifications,
things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then suddenly someone's like, but this QA app doesn't do this thing, and you're suddenly competing with all the QA apps or whatever.
Yeah.
Snagging, or like I'm sure snagging comes up a lot for you to like log defects and snagging. Surely that's a common question.
Yeah. So I mentioned QA because that sort of QA and defects thing is, like I said, kind of the next logical leap when you start talking about permits and compliance. Certainly I've had a few clients say to me, like, permits looks great. When's QA coming? When's defects coming? When are we able to do it all? And yeah, we kind of like there are like sort of workflows and things you can do in Civillo to manage defects, like put photos in and notes and things like that as well. We also have sort of a workflow for like survey requests too, and that's another one that comes up a lot, especially because a lot of surveyors and survey managers are, inputting data to Civillo, managing it for the engineers, and they, no one seems to have the, a killer survey requests app. So that's another workflow as well. It's like, all right, can we build this? Does it make sense? Is there something else out there? Do we want to go down that path? Like, yeah, but defects for sure, like you said, is certainly comes up a lot.
What else is then, like, it'd be super interesting to think about what else is highly requested in terms of workflows. Community notifications, does that come up?
Yes, it has. Often? Yeah, it has a bit. But we've thought about all of these things really, like from, at different levels. But I think for quite a while, we've had the idea that it'd be really great for the community sort of managers to be able to sort of map the different stakeholders, the different properties, like, put a big red mark over, sort of the more difficult or sensitive stakeholders. You can sort of log.
Be quiet near Wendy's house or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Or like click on one and sort of say, oh, yeah, we've been to this place 3 times and this is the last thing. Kind of like, it's almost like trying to squeeze a CRM into Civillo. And then that brings you back to the sort of question of, all right, should they be doing this in a CRM and, we feed the data into Civillo, or can we sort of put these features into Civillo itself and do the whole thing there?
I was going to say, it must be super difficult to sort of, I guess, to frame it. Like everything we do, or Jason's team does in product with Aphex, is making the tool optimized for engineers to build look-ahead plans. So it's like this very specific cohort of individuals. Because you're kind of covering a lot of bases centered around geospatial, is it a real challenge to actually choose, right, who are we going to prioritize, which group of individuals? Because it's not just one team now, it's multiple teams all wanting the best solution for their department or their sort of section.
It's very challenging, and it's gotten more challenging the longer we've been doing this, the more people we've had using Civillo. It's hard for me because I'm sort of client facing, so I sort of get all these requests and I'm talking to all our clients and every day, and they're asking me for all these things, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But then I have to sort of take that to the product development team, and they've got already a million things on their plate, and they're just like, oh yeah, great, we can do that, but don't know when. Like, it's hard to prioritize things. I guess one of the things we have always done is try and consider, all right, what is going to give the most value to the widest range of people, the most users. If we keep getting asked the same thing over and over again, that's a pretty clear sign that this could benefit a lot of people. But that's kind of how we've built all the features to date, is by the users sort of, all right, this is how we're using it, this is how we want to use it. But it gets a lot harder, as you said, when there's a wider range of people and more people all wanting different things. So yeah, definitely at the moment that prioritization has been quite tricky. It's one of the things we've talked about a lot lately.
Yeah, hot tip. We just like 5 days ago published a public roadmap where people can go and look at it. They can see what we're working on. We did make public, I don't know if it's there at time of this being published, the ship dates of different things that we're working on. People can upvote and add requests to that public roadmap, which is great because it gives people visibility, and it's a way for people to give you feedback on this is the most important thing. If you have a customer success team like we do, they kind of game the system and go tell all their users to vote up. So within like a couple of hours of it being live, one of the CS team had gone and basically rallied a whole bunch of users to vote up the thing they wanted us to work on. So no matter what you do, it can be gamed. The system can be gamed.
Yeah. I was going to say you're bold to put that out there, and voting and dates and things like that. I don't think I could ever convince our guys to do that.
The benefit of it is that you don't have to be the brunt of it. It can go through to, and everyone's got visibility. And just today I was getting a when's this going to happen from a key customer in Oz, and said it's on the roadmap. You can see you're the only person voting for it. Like,
Yeah, that's not bad actually.
Right. So maybe you got to get some friends to come and vote for it.
Is that I was looking at your website the other day. Actually, I was seeing like there's a big tree of sort of product development. Is that what you're referring to? Or is it
That's
something
gone.
different?
No, that's gone. That used to be the old way we'd do that, but that got updated pretty infrequently,
huge.
Steve.
It was huge.
Yeah.
I was looking
So
at that.
now and most of it's done in there.
Yeah.
So we swapped that out for now, like a more active thing that's like integrated to our product, the actual set of tools that we use for the development.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So we expose the features that we're building, most of them, and users can give feedback that gets like triaged, and then they can upvote and add comments to the existing ones, which it saves all of the feedback going into this giant mess, a repository that someone has to go and comb through for the 4 nuggets of very useful information.
Yeah. All right. That's certainly something. I'll text the guys and sort of say, hey, here's what Jason and Carlos are doing. Like,
I guess one of the things that's interesting to think about, and I think I might have done a post about this the other day on LinkedIn, it seems as though there is kind of like this organic adoption of geospatial or GIS type tools in infrastructure jobs. It feels like the BIM side has to get like pushed. It's like less organically adopted. Do your customer base also flow over to that building side and BIM, or is it predominantly infrastructure and GIS? Where do you see that sort of balance between the two, or is it the same thing for you?
So our user base is predominantly infrastructure. There is a bit of overlap still. Like we have BIM models coming to our platform on certain projects, like especially rail projects with station builds and things like that. You see a lot of 3D BIM type models. I guess our experience is in the infrastructure sector, and that's how our platform's built up. So it's kind of suited more towards those long linear jobs rather than the high vertical jobs. But certainly there's still room for BIM stuff in infrastructure as evidenced by some of the projects that we work on. And I guess it's just more information, but it's also about integrating those models and integrating that information. So I think maybe one of the reasons BIM might not have taken off so much in infrastructure is I think the platforms for viewing BIM are a bit harder to access, or I think they sort of all sit by themselves, the models. So rather than sort of georeferencing real world datums, I think a lot of BIM models are sort of standalone arbitrary coordinate system, which sort of makes sense to the architects or the designers doing that. But when you try and sort of overlay it against a real world plan or a real world aerial image with other data on top of it, I think that's where there has been issues. But I think that's getting better as well, because most of the sort of BIM type files that get brought into Civillo have coordinates these days and sort of can sit along nicely with everything else.
Does that, I'd imagine, I'm trying to steer away too many product questions, but like, does that put quite a burden from a product performance perspective? Because the burden of that type of asset is significant compared to like raster images or what else you might bring in.
Depending on the size, but at a certain point, like if you get really, really big, really, really detailed stuff, any platform's going to slow down. So it can happen. I'll say that sort of the speed of layers and speed of data is one of the things that's highly valued by our team. So they've sort of done best, like a really good job of being able to handle those type of data sets. And we have some big ones come in that can be viewed in 3D and used for cross sections and things like that. But I guess the other thing from our perspective is sometimes you don't need that level of detail during construction. So it's all great to have every single little nut and bolt and every, hundreds of attributes on everything. But when you're just out there trying to deliver it, trying to put it in the right area, plan for excavating, pouring concrete and all those type of things, sometimes you don't need all that information. So it's it's a sort of fine balance between how much data and detail you need and usability, and not making it too complicated for people. But yeah, I suppose, again, it differs on the projects as well, and differs on, who's producing those models.
Yeah, 100%. We have the same. I've got this same fear. Like we get similar like requests for 3D for like planning out sequences of work. And yeah, you don't need the detail probably more often than not in the construction phase, but it's like if you've got the tool, I've always been worried that people would just like try and push it to the limit till it falls over.
So people definitely do that.
Yeah, for sure. Carlos, sorry mate, I've like hogged all the questions. You got anything you want to throw in on top?
Oh, you really put me on the spot there. I was just listening. Intently.
Carlos was having a dad nap.
I guess, keen to understand what do the next few years look like. So we've got this clearly sort of growing geospatial sort of set of tools, focus from customers, and sort of application and use within projects. Like if I go to Digital Construction Week in London, like a third of it is now GIS. Like it's a huge proportion. Yeah, what's coming up in the next couple of years? Where do you think it will go? You've obviously got in mind some short-term plans to release certain modules for things like permits, but
nice, got short-term plans in there, Carlos. Well done.
Yeah. Trademark. What's in a couple of years? What you get excited about?
Good question. I think one of the things that is the future for us is like integrations, as I mentioned before, just having geospatial software integrate with everything else in construction, sort of not sitting there in a silo and sort of being its own thing. And I think now with sort of geospatial and GIS and all these different platforms more prevalent, I think that will happen because there's a growing push, I guess, for digital engineering and having everything, all in the same systems, all talking to each other. I think that's certainly the future. I think as well, like the technology getting better, like survey technology getting better as well. That's changed the way I think data's captured, the way data's presented as well. So I'm sure you've heard about point clouds and sort of laser scanning, handheld laser scanning, all those type of things. That's getting a lot better as well. And I suppose the key there is not to sort of get blown away by how good the technology is, how quickly you can sort of create a point cloud, but it's like, okay, we can create a point cloud quickly, and now we can georeference it, we can extract the data we need from it. We can actually use that data in a meaningful way rather than sort of going out there, doing a big scan and, oh, here it is, make something of it. Like, so I think being able to, I think that sort of scan to BIM almost, extracting automation of extraction, so AI and those sorts of tools, sort of help with those those kind of things. I think that's definitely one to watch, and yet definitely interested to see where the automation AI side of things does affect geospatial, but also just construction more broadly.
Yeah, one thing for sure about construction is like we don't seem to get, I'll keep myself in the bucket for the moment, we don't seem to get too distracted by like the shiny object really easily. It's like, show me the actual thing that's valuable, not the like you can do this jazzy thing. Yeah. So I can't stop there without then asking the question about your comment about AI. I get accused about going down this AI rabbit hole too many times on podcast episodes, but I'm kind of a skeptic on actual use cases at the moment. Having said that, we've got one that we're working on. But anyway, I'm a bit of a skeptic on actual valuable use cases that have return on investment. What do you see in the geospatial space that could be useful without, maybe giving away your roadmap?
Yeah, look, I don't know if we're really going to be in the AI space ourselves anytime soon. But no, just a conversation I was having with one of our directors the other day. He sort of mentioning that feature extraction from laser scanning and point clouds might be a place where it could be really useful. So rather than have a surveyor or a designer or a digital engineer sort of slave away trying to extract curb and trees and all these different things from these big sort of raw point clouds or raw survey data, that I think AI tools, I'm sure there's probably already stuff out there that's doing this or trying to do it, to sort of do a lot of that work for you. I think that's certainly one where I think it has potential. Yeah, other than that, like you, I don't personally, I don't see too many for myself that I'm going to use, like at least none that have been invented yet. But that's the thing, like all sort of big technological changes, like you can never picture them 10 years, 20 years before,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you know, all of a sudden it's there, and we all think, how do we ever live without this before? So I'm just sort of intrigued to see what pops up, really.
Yeah, I don't know if you have the same thing, but basically, like all the tools that we use internally as like a software company have over the last year introduced AI features within the tool set. And then like you use it twice and you're like, well, that's a terribly written bit of rubbish. I might not use that again. So I haven't found anything that I'd like to stick with.
Yeah, I tend to
right.
ignore the little write with AI little buttons that sort of seem to pop up on everything now.
Exactly, 100%. When I talk to projects and teams, there's this like common pattern, and the reason why I'm so interested in keep talking to people about the geospatial stuff is lots of people and lots of companies, especially the bigger companies, the bigger projects, have these platforms, and like the big one that I won't name check, and they're dropping like tons of money on it, boatloads of money on it. And they've got whole teams managing it. The project engineer or the project manager or the site engineer, like to get anything out of it, has to go make a request that takes 3 months for someone to do, and that's not exactly right, and all that caper. And so, yeah, I definitely see, well, my perspective is in the future that there is going to be a construction specific. I don't think the big conglomerate that is across every industry is going to be the thing that wins. So I don't know if you have a similar view in terms of how the sort of marketplace evolves.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And yeah, again, not to make it too all about Civillo, but that's one of the problems that we're trying to solve, is to avoid the need to spend so much money and so many resources on something that ultimately is a little bit slow and is not as usable as other platforms. So I think that's one area we're trying to position ourselves is to be a really easy to use, fast way of accessing spatial data that everyone likes to use and gets a lot of value out of. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And I think you're right as well with your point about construction specific, because I mean, we're very construction specific in what we've built, and I think that's another one of the advantages.
As my mother says, we're unique.
Yeah.
Awesome, mate. Thank you very much for taking the time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Carlos, welcome back. How did you feel after getting that one back under your belt?
Yeah, apart from that directly pointed question when I was in my little listening world, no, that's all good. Steve, thank you very much for coming on. That was really interesting, mate.
No worries. Thanks a lot, guys. Really enjoyed it.